Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. Before we get started with the interview with Josh Kaufman, author of Personal MBA and also How to Fight a Hydra, which is the book we'll be talking about in this second part, I wanted to let you know that we have a couple of free audiobook codes for you. If you're going to be interviewing for residency, our audiobook just went up. 100 strong residency interview questions, answers, and rationales. You can find it on Audible, Amazon, and soon on iTunes. So if you want to get a free code for that, email me at aaguerra@dmac.edu. And let's get started with the interview. Okay, well, let's make the switch now to How to Fight a Hydra. First, can you tell me a little bit about the book and why you decided to use a fictional allegory as kind of your genre? I'm sure you didn't just say, hey, I'm going to write a fictional allegory, let's do it. It probably came around through some process. So how did you decide on this book and how and the method of delivery?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I did not intend to write fiction this year. It just happened to be the best way to talk about the areas that the book covers, which is ambition, uncertainty, risk, and fear of the unknown. And so the genesis of Hydra was I was actually working on a productivity book. Same general approach as Personal MBA. There's an enormous amount of research and literature and techniques that people have discovered over the past several decades about how to do your work and how to do it well. And so the goal when I started writing the book was to figure out, okay, well, let's collect the most useful of those techniques and put them into a single resource, something that people new to the topic can learn a lot very quickly. And so as I was writing this book, one of the things that kept coming up over and over again was that managing tasks or having a better tracking system or figuring out how to organize your work is not necessarily the core of the problem. What I was hearing from people was a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty. Like, I want to start a business, but I don't know if I have what it takes. I don't know if I can make it work. I don't know if this is going to be a good investment of my time and energy. And in the same vein, my second book, The First 20 Hours, was about learning new skills. And there were the same types of concerns and hesitations. Like, I don't know if I'm capable of pulling this off. I don't know if this is the best use of my time or if I'm going to be able to be good enough, whatever good enough means to me. And so I shifted. I thought that was very interesting because, no matter what work process, task tracking system, you use to manage your work, it's not going to be able to get rid of that. It's not going to be able to take away 100% of the uncertainty or the risk from your work. There's always going to be a portion of the things that you try to do that you legitimately don't know how it's going to turn out. Maybe a great idea, might be a terrible idea. And so I thought it was really interesting to dig into that question. That what does it look like to take on an ambitious project, something that you know is going to be challenging and you know is going to be difficult, to choose to pursue that, knowing full well you're going to struggle with a lot of things and you're going to make a lot of mistakes and you're going to need to improve all of your skills and abilities to be able to do this. And it might not work. So how do you go about pursuing those ambitious projects in a skillful way? And so that's what How to Fight Hydra is about. It takes a lot of both modern psychology research on how to handle those types of emotions, and then also combines that with there's a lot of ancient philosophy and ancient thinking about uncertainty and risk and fear of the unknown. And so How to Fight a Hydra evolved out of that research, and the fictional context allows you to essentially watch someone do this in a skillful way. to choose to do something difficult and then to both persist and improve themselves to the point where they are able to bring that ambitious project to completion.
Yeah, and I love that it was around the time of a movie, so around 2 hours for the book when it was in audio. And
yeah,
I turned right around and my wife said, I need you to get this thing off the deck. It was something that I had to dig into. We basically had created this planner that was like 5 by 5, and it basically froze. So I had to somehow dig it out, and I was like, oh, looks like again another 2 hours. Let's listen to it again. So it really went just like that. I had the
that's great.
Audible up there on the deck, and here I was basically taking a shovel, using it as a pickaxe to break this stuff apart, fighting my own little Hydra there. But I want to talk about a lot of questions that came up when I was thinking about it, which was the first is, it would be so nice to know that I just need a torch to attack a problem, and that takes care of it once and for all. As you severed the head and it
totally
cauterized it, that'd be great. But talk about a little bit attacking a problem once and for all if you don't have a torch handy.
Yeah. So if people aren't familiar with the mythology, so think huge lizard monster with multiple heads, and if you cut one off, but you don't burn the stump, so cauterize that wound with a torch, not only is the head going to grow back, at least 2 heads are going to grow back. And so it's this challenge where you have to make progress. You can only do one thing at a time, right? So cut off a head,
yep.
But you have to consolidate your progress as you go, or things get worse. And so as a metaphor for these super complicated, ambitious projects that we're trying to pursue, it's a really good one, because if you try to attack all of the heads at the same time, the only result of that is you become overwhelmed and are defeated very easily. The process that works is isolating a single head, making a very deliberate strike, and then consolidating your progress. And you do that over and over and over until the beast is dead. And so I really like the image and the metaphor of a Hydra for all of these big projects, or even small projects, like, digging out your planter. There are lots of different steps. And if you try to do all of those steps at the same time, or feel like you should be doing all of those steps at the same time, the work can become very frustrating very quickly. And so just getting yourself into the mindset of, I'm going to choose to do one thing. I'm going to do it deliberately and well, and I am going to make sure this problem is done before I move on to the next one. That's a very strong stance to attack any complex project.
There was a book, Getting Things Done, and I can't remember the author's name, but it was on one of those business books, and I think you referenced it once in MBA.
Yeah, David Allen.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how each of these kind of fits into MBA? Did they come from MBA and you made it fictional, or were they just kind of was this its own book and not kind of, I guess maybe I'm asking the question wrong, but how did you fictionalize nonfiction?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I have often envied fiction writers for their ability to, if they get stuck, they can just make something up.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's really handy because my background in writing is research-based nonfiction, and so it was just a fundamentally different approach. And the thing that was really interesting, I spent a lot of time trying to think about, like, what is the situation that is going to illustrate the things that the research-based things that I want to highlight. What is the best way to set up a situation where those things can be illustrated in a interesting and useful way? And so, it was a completely different process. Actually, I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I think it's just, there's something different about, instead of most research-based nonfiction, where the author is essentially making recommendations, telling you what to do, giving research citations or studies or examples or case studies, where it's very telling. fiction allows you to use the device of story to show people what it looks like. And so the device that I used, the narrative device that I use in Hydra, is essentially a journal. Somebody who is going after something big and is having, frankly, a really difficult time doing it and runs into a lot of challenges and difficulties. And you get to see the protagonist, I call the protagonist the adventurer. You get to see the protagonist both realize certain things are a problem and struggle with it a little bit, and then use a technique in order to make progress on this challenging thing that they're facing. And I think in terms of taking away lessons from a nonfiction work, it's a really interesting and different way to go about that process of communicating. Like, yeah, there are some useful approaches to how you see the world and how you act within it that you can learn. And fiction just happens to be a really great device to communicate these specific lessons.
Let's talk about another one of those lessons. So attacking the same problem that has a different solution. Let me give maybe an analogy. Sometimes, kids, you want to bribe them to do something, you give them candy. Maybe you've got an employee that you want to keep, you give them a little more money. But then the next time the same thing comes around, the candy doesn't work, the money doesn't work. Your solution is gone. So now you have to come up with a new solution. Can you talk a little bit about how, I defeated one head, I did this, I tricked it, and then the next time that didn't work. And how to get kind of through that obstacle of, come on, that worked last time.
Yeah. The world has a pesky way of making previous solutions obsolete.
Absolutely.
And so, there's a point in the story, and it's also really. This is my first fiction book, so I've never on podcasts or interviews had to worry about spoilers before.
Oh yeah, okay.
So I'll try to be as specific as I can without spoiling any part of the story. But the adventurer is fighting this monster, and they try a technique, and it works really well. And then they try the technique again, and it does not work. The monster learns and adapts. And so, it's whether, like you said, whether you're dealing with personal relationships, your family or your friends, or professional relationships, you really need to be conscious of the types of techniques or the things that you're doing, both in terms of experimenting, so trying a wide variety of techniques to see what works best. But then you can't rely on the same handful of things to give you consistent results over time. And the reason behind that is because the challenges we face are always at a point in time in a specific environment and with specific circumstances. And so that's why, going back to approaches like the personal MBA, I think it's really important to understand how to think about approaching certain types of solutions. And so something like a toolbox, for lack of a better metaphor, having a wide variety of things that you can apply to understand the situation you're in right now and understand the context, and then a wide variety of techniques or approaches or things that you can try in that context is just a far more effective way to approach the problem than the classic, what's the saying? If all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Okay, yeah.
That's just a fundamentally ineffective way to approach life. You need to have lots of different techniques and tools at your disposal. And so that's really where the benefit of this type of reading and research comes in handy. It gives you a much wider array of things that you can do in response to different circumstances.
The biggest emotional response I had to the book, and it's not that I didn't have an emotional response to Personal MBA, except the whole, you'll actually probably end up in a deficit position after the MBA. That was just kind of shocking.
Yeah.
But was when the adventurer had to attack alone and was put in the position where, and I'm like, I know this is fiction. I absolutely know this is fiction, but it rung so true that, okay, I want to leave my job. I want to start this new business. I want to become an entrepreneur or writer or whatever it is. let's go, come with me. And everybody's like, look, man, I got these golden handcuffs and there is no way I'm leaving. So can you talk a little bit about attacking something so big alone when others won't go with you? And sure, they'll come with you once you succeed, but they certainly won't if you haven't succeeded.
Yeah. So the early parts of all of these projects to other people in the outside world usually feel like really weird and particularly scary to them. And so, and there are often situations in business and career and life where you see an opportunity that other people just legitimately don't see or don't agree exists as an opportunity. And so, in this story, the way that manifests itself is the adventurer, wants to accomplish this really big thing. And the early response from family and friends and mentors is that's not a real thing. You can't do that. You're not the type of person who is capable of doing that. That's a separate magisteria of individual. You're just not the type. And that's really difficult to hear. And part of that rings true when I decided to quit my job at P&G. I remember the day that I told my dad. And for context, he was an elementary school teacher and then a principal for 30 plus years.
Okay. I have a pension, so okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so, his background is a very secure, very stable, very respectable, but also not super high variance career. And he was very proud because the starting salary that I had when I started at P&G was greater than the salary that he was making, 25 years into the profession. And I remember the day when I told him that I was going to quit, and he just didn't understand how that could possibly be a good idea because I had already accomplished this really great thing. I already had a really wonderful career going. Why risk it? Why give it up? And, the out of the very best of intentions, he was looking out for me. He wanted the best for me and did not want there to be a situation that I made a decision that I later came to regret. And so it's easy to say, with the benefit of knowing what happened after that it was absolutely the best decision for me, and that my life was way better now after having made that decision than before. He didn't know what was going to happen at that point, and neither did I. And so it's important to recognize that, if you're pursuing big things and you're doing things that are a little outside the norm or what's expected, the people around you are probably not going to understand, and not all of them will be supportive. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That can be a sign of care in a lot of instances. But that also doesn't mean that it's something that you don't need to pursue or that is a bad idea for you. You may see an opportunity that other people don't see, and it's important to understand that as well.
Well, let's kind of shift gears to the other direction, which is let's say that you're successful in whatever entrepreneurial venture you get into, and now people are coming to you all the time like, oh, I've got this really great idea for a thing. How do you protect your time against opportunities that might or might not be in your best interest?
I love this topic. This is one of my favorite things. It all comes back to being very clear about what you want and why you want it. And so, as you do things and are successful in doing them, and your reputation grows, people will make offers. Hey, I have an idea for something that we might collaborate on. Here's this thing that's kind of like what you're doing now, but is something a little bit different. Maybe you should pursue that. And so the more you are clear in your own mind about what it exactly is that you want, what you're pursuing, why you want it, and the types of trade-offs that you are willing to both make and not make, the easier it is to sift through all of those opportunities that come your way and figure out, okay, is this something that is truly beneficial to me? Is it going to bring me in the direction that I want? Or is this a distraction or something that is going to be actively detrimental, something that's going to take you further away from the thing you want? And so a good example of this in my own career is there are a lot of authors who make essentially their primary business is public speaking. It's not necessarily writing and publishing.
So back of the house money.
Yeah, exactly. So it's super difficult to, when an incoming offer comes in saying, hey, I would really love you to come here on this day and give a speech, and we'll pay you, a really nice amount of money and all of that. It's a high status, lucrative opportunity. And for some people, that is absolutely in line with what they want. It might be the primary thing that they want. So for me, part of the reason that I quit my corporate job to do this was I wanted to spend a lot of time at home with my family. That's a primary motivating factor for me. And so it's always interesting when a new opportunity comes in, because there's a very real risk that if I accept, or if I accept too much, I will be actively deciding to go further and further from the thing that I've decided is very important to me. And so there's always this this balancing act of, is this truly a good idea? Is this really something that I want and something that I'm willing to make trade-offs in order to get? And the more clear you are about those values in the first place, the easier it is to look at an opportunity that looks really great on paper and just say, you know what? I'm really honored that you thought of me, but I'm going to have to decline, and here's why.
Okay. Well, I've asked you a ton of questions. Is there anything that maybe I haven't covered that you want to say? Maybe which book to read first, something like that, or any other bits of wisdom that you would want to leave the listeners with, who are mostly pharmacists, but some pharmacy students out there and some thinking about pharmacy as a career? Yeah,
I would highly recommend listening to How to Fight a Hydra first, or reading it. So the audio version's an hour and a half. Or I've heard most people are able to sit down and read the print version in 45 minutes to an hour. And I think in terms of a universal topic that's going to touch us all in some way, shape, or form, it's a really great short meditation that you'll get a lot out of. So I would start there. And then particularly if you are interested in the business of pharmacy, I think Personal MBA is going to be a very good resource for you. There's all sorts of ways of thinking about what businesses are and how they work that, no matter what stage you are in your career, having a more accurate and useful understanding of how companies work is going to benefit you in a substantial way.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and just size-wise, if you want like a stocking stuffer, Personal MBA is a little bit tougher to get in the stocking. How to Fight a Hydra fits perfectly. So just
awesome. I didn't think of that. That's true.
Okay, but I was just thinking. I mean, it's time. It's going to be. Let's see. Gosh. So Black Friday's coming up. Cyber Monday. All that stuff. So definitely. Okay. And anything else you want to tell anybody, or?
No, I think one thing that I always like to tell when I speak to people who come from a particular background in industry is that there are a lot of people, pharmacists in this case, who will spend all of their time and all of their energy getting really, really, really good at pharmacy. And that's a wonderful thing. We need those people in the world. But there's another path that works just as well, if not better in most cases. And that's becoming really good at the primary thing that you do, and then choosing to spend a portion of your time and energy learning about and getting good at things that are related to what you do. And in this case, understanding business, understanding the best business practice, and improving those skills combined with your pharmacy knowledge will give you opportunities that you would that would not otherwise be open to you if you focus all of your time and energy just on pharmacy. So I highly recommend read about business, read about psychology, do communications and speaking courses. So the more skills that you are able to develop that you will be able to use in combination or in concert, the more opportunities you'll have and the more successful you'll be in your career. And from personal experience, this approach not only works, but I think it makes your career both more rewarding, but also more interesting and more enjoyable as well. So don't be afraid to branch out from your primary discipline. It's absolutely worth it.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for being on the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Tony, this was super fun. Thanks for having me on.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.